You've done some of that, and I noticed. But would you care to tell us what kind of an...
You can see all of this later in our schedule and at cspan.org. The House is coming in now to debate two bills dealing with droughts and violence in the Ukraine. And House Republicans are set to meet this hour about how to move forward on the debt ceiling.
Under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Record votes on postponed questions will be taken later.
To suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2431, the National Integrated Drought Information Systems Act of 2013, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 258, H.R. 2431, a bill to reauthorize the National Integrated Drought Information System.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall, and the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 2431, the bill now under consideration.
Without objection.
And Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2431, a bill to reauthorize the National Integrated Drought Information System. I want to thank Chairman Smith for his good work in bringing this bill to the House floor and for his bipartisan support. I also want to thank you and Representative Ben Lujan of New Mexico for joining me as an original sponsor. In 1998, Congress passed the National Drought Policy Act, establishing a commission to provide recommendations on federal drought policies. The concept of creating a national drought monitoring and information system was proposed by the Commission in its 2000 report and promoted by various stakeholders, including the Western Governors Association in the 2004 report, quote, creating a drought early warning system for the 21st century, unquote. And I was pleased to become involved in this effort with former Congressman and now Senator Mark Udall, and to introduce the NIDIS Act of 2006, which Congress passed and became public law. NIDIS is administered within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NIDIS established the U.S. Drought Portal, which has become a very valuable resource for decision makers at the federal, state, and local levels, and for farmers, businessmen, and individuals. This website provides current data for weather observations, early warnings about droughts, and support services for managing droughts. The website includes the U.S. Drought Monitor Map, another valuable feature that is updated weekly. For example, according to the most recent Drought Monitor Map, about 21% of the U.S. is experiencing severe to exceptional drought conditions, and more than 56% of the country has abnormally dry to exceptional drought conditions. Madam Speaker, NIDIS is an example of a program that's working effectively and that has broad support. Rather than creating a new government bureaucracy, NIDIS represents a collaborative framework between federal, state, and academic partners. The NIDIS reauthorization will improve interagency coordination, early warnings, critical data sharing, and decision bases related to drought. The bill encourages further research, monitoring, and forecasting, along with further development of regional early warning systems. Madam Speaker, reauthorizing NIDIS will strengthen this important program and will help our state, it will help the local, and it will help the federal officials, farmers, and water managers better prepare for and respond to drought. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 2431.
The gentlelady is recognized.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. I rise in support of 2431, the National Integrated Drought Information System Reauthorization Act of 2013. This vital program, known as NIDIS, was originated by my friend and former committee chair, Mr. Ralph Hall, in 2006. The program provides critical drought information to communities all across our nation. Over the past 3 decades, it is estimated that droughts have cost our country hundreds of billions of dollars in economic impacts. Loss estimates from the 2012 drought alone run upwards of $70 billion. Moreover, the effects of climate change are anticipated to exacerbate this problem in many parts of the country, including my home state of Texas. Right now, California is experiencing its driest period in recorded history. 67% of the state of California is experiencing extreme or exceptional drought conditions. We all know that farmers and ranchers bear the brunt of these dry conditions. That hits the pocketbooks of every American as food prices do go up. But the damage is not limited to agriculture. For instance, the West, conditions are again ripe for extreme wildfires that scarred more than 9 million acres last year, putting homes and property in jeopardy. Tourism is suffering as water levels in lakes and rivers plummet and snowpacks languish, leaving boats on dry land and skis in the attic. Communities are imposing water restrictions, and power plants and grid operators are taking a serious look at the emergency plans should water for cooling towers and hydroelectric dams fall short. If you look at the top 5 most expensive disasters in the United States since 1980, 3 of those are due to drought. The NIDIS program is intended to help alleviate some of the economic impacts of drought. Notably, one of the program's goals is to improve drought warning, early warning. Advanced warning of impending droughts would allow states, localities, and farmers to better plan their activities so that the economic costs associated with droughts could be reduced or mitigated. In light of the scope of the economic impacts of drought and the potential of the NIDIS program to lessen these impacts, I remain concerned about the authorization levels in H.R. 2431. My Democratic colleagues and I tried to modestly increase the authorization levels during committee consideration of the bill, but we were not successful. Every witness who had ever testified or spoken to our committee about this program has highlighted the need to improve the program's early warning capability. This isn't a goal that can be accomplished for free. It will take a sustained investment of additional funds to achieve results we desperately need. While I wish the authorization numbers in the bill before us today were higher, they are much better than the numbers in the Senate bill, which locks the program into a funding cap and is below current spending for the next 5 years. When the federal government is spending tens of billions of dollars per year to mitigate the effects of drought, I think it makes sense to spend a couple million extra dollars to try to reduce those massive costs to our taxpayers and our communities. It's pretty clear that in this instance, our ounce of prevention will get us a pound of cure. In spite of these concerns, however, I support H.R. 2431 and the reauthorization of NIDIS, a program which provides crucial information to help our farmers and communities prepare for and mitigate the impacts of drought. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield such time as he may consume for the gentleman from Texas, the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Smith.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the former chairman of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee for yielding me time. H.R. 2431, the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, Reauthorization Act of 2013, makes minor improvements to the NIDIS program and helps establish better drought forecasting and coordination. I am glad that the Science, Space, and Technology Committee's Chairman Emeritus, Congressman Ralph Hall of Texas, is the lead sponsor of this bill and the original author of the NIDIS authorization in 2006. I thank the gentleman for his persistent leadership over the years on this issue. Recent droughts in Texas and around the country have been severe, and the NIDIS program has helped state and local governments, farmers, ranchers, and others both monitor and predict drought conditions. More than 1/3 of the United States is currently experiencing moderate to severe drought conditions. By some estimates, the historic drought in 2012 cost our national economy as much as $70 billion. NIDIS is a good program that has a history of bipartisan support, and it represents the kind of interagency and intergovernmental cooperation that we need to reauthorize in this difficult fiscal environment. As a success story, the NIDIS program currently operates the U.S. Drought Portal, a website that features a range of services related to drought. This includes historical data on past droughts, current data from climate observations, early warnings about emerging and potential droughts, decision support services for managing droughts, and a forum for stakeholders to discuss drought-related issues. These services have been vital to our efforts to better forecast drought as well as understand the conditions that lead to drought. This bill reauthorizes an important program that provides early warnings about potential droughts. It also supports services for local and state decision makers to better manage and prepare for drought conditions. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and yield back the balance of my time, and on the way to doing so, want to once again thank the Chairman Emeritus of the Science, Space and Technology Committee for taking the lead on this bill and on the subject as he has for many, many years.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweiker.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to my friends from Texas, though at this moment I feel like I'm surrounded by Texans in this particular discussion. I'm from Arizona. I'm actually from the desert part of Arizona, from the desert Southwest. So why is a bill such as, H.R. 2431 so important to us? The data collection and the management of the data models for those of us who are in an arid region of the country is really, really important to us. And we've come so far in the last couple decades. The ability for my water management authorities in our reservoirs, in knowing what's happening in the snowpacks all the way up into the Colorados and on this side of the Continental Divide, knowing whether we're moving into a La Nina or El Nina year, which actually makes huge differences to the expected rainfalls, particularly in our winter months in the desert Southwest. This is important to us because we're getting better and better at forecasting even a year out in our expectations. And so I have great appreciation to the gentlewoman from Texas and the Chairman Emeritus and my other actual chairman from Texas. One more time, remember, as Texans, you're Easterners to those of us in Arizona. This bill is appreciated. I know there's always a discussion about funding. A great interest in this is the continued movement of the data sharing as our universities across the country, particularly in the Southwest, build better and better and healthier and more robust models, and the ability for that data to help states like mine manage our water resources into the future. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman reserves. The gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further requests for time. I simply would urge the support for 2431 and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I have no further requests for time, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2431?
Madam Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
Will suspend. First, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 2431 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed. Without further objection.
Madam Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The gentleman from Texas requests the yeas and the nays. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.Res. 447 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 447, resolution supporting the democratic and European aspirations of the people of Ukraine and their right to choose their own future free of intimidation and fear.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
I thank the Chair, and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 days to revise and extend their remarks and introduce extraneous materials on this measure.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank my good friend and distinguished colleague, the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Eliot Engel, for introducing this bipartisan resolution supporting the democratic aspirations of the Ukrainian people. It is a timely appeal to the government of Ukraine to stand down and to avoid all further violence, to exercise the utmost restraint and avoid confrontation. It calls on the government to bring to justice those responsible for violence against peaceful protesters and to release and drop any criminal charges against those detained for peacefully exercising their democratic rights. At this point, the government's crackdown has led to the deaths of at least 4 protesters, perhaps more, and throughout Ukraine to numerous beatings, arrests, detentions, abductions, including some from hospitals, the harassment of activists, journalists, medics, lawyers, and pro-democracy NGOs. On the Kiev Maidan, or Independence Square, alone, more than 1,800 individuals, mostly protesters, but also some riot police, have been injured. 36 persons are confirmed missing. 49 people remain in detention, and 26 are under house arrest. At least 30 medics working to aid the injured on the Maidan have been attacked. 136 journalists have been attacked on the Maidan, including investigative journalist Tatiana Chernobyl, brutally beaten on Christmas Day, and who investigators rather incredibly claim was a victim of road rage. One of the most outrageous examples has been the case of activist Dmitry Bulaturov, who was abducted for 8 days before being left in a forest city outside of Kiev, during which time he was tortured by his captors, who tried to force him to say he was an American spy. The heroism, Madam Speaker, of the Ukrainian people, persistently demonstrating, struggling, risking themselves for justice and dignity, is deeply inspiring. The witness of so many clergy on the Maidan is a powerful reminder of the spiritual values that are at stake. Just last Thursday, I had the high honor and privilege of meeting in my office with Patriarch Filaret of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and Patriarch Sivi Lozovov of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. These brave and holy religious leaders are deeply concerned for the faithful and for the whole Ukrainian nation, and alarmed about the potential for even worse violence, perhaps even civil conflict. Patriarch Filaret said recently, and I quote him, "I appeal to both the power and the opposition groups to stop the violence and to come to the negotiating table. All of you are responsible before God for your earthly doings," he said. At the Vatican, Pope Francis called for an end to the violence and said, "I am close to the Ukraine in prayer, in particular to those who have lost their lives in recent days and to their families. I hope that a constructive dialogue between the institutions of civil society can take place, that any resort to violence is avoided, and that the spirit of peace and a search for common ground is in the hearts of all." Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York expressed strong support for anti-government protesters in Ukraine. He said on his blog that government thugs, relishing the chance to bludgeon and harass the hundreds of thousands of patriotic Ukrainians, and described the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church as a, quote, church that has been starved, jackbooted, imprisoned, tortured, persecuted, and martyred by Hitler, Stalin, and company. That said, Madam Speaker, I do want to note that there is a paradox here. I know there are many outstanding people working in and for the Ukrainian government who love their country and have its best interests at heart. Last year, for example, I met many times with Ukrainian ministers, high-level officials, and the ambassador, including meetings in Kiev. This was because the 2013 Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Kushara, chaired the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and made the fight against human trafficking a top priority for the organization. In June, it held a high-level conference in Kiev to investigate and promulgate best practices and ways that the 57 OSCE countries can better coordinate anti-trafficking efforts, including through training, transportation, and hospitality industry employees in victim identification. The Kiev call to action was serious and successful. I know because I was there. And what came out of that was a new OSCE plan of action to combat human trafficking. Madam Speaker, I do want to point out that this resolution does not take any position on whether Ukraine should sign an association agreement with the European Union. That is a decision for the Ukrainians to make themselves. At the committee markup, we decided to make that point clear, and the message should be clear. This is not about politics. This is about human rights. Congress is supporting the Ukrainian people in their defense of universal human rights and not inserting itself into the question of what Ukraine does vis-à-vis the European Union. Madam Speaker, the Ukrainian people have endured horrific suffering over the course of the last century, and this is what gives their peaceful resistance on the Maidan such power. 2 world wars were fought on their soil. In the 1930s, Stalin inflicted a genocidal famine, as we all know, on them, which resulted in the death of millions of men, women, and children, to say nothing of 70 years as a captive nation in the Soviet Union. In the 1980s, many of us in this chamber, and on the Helsinki Commission especially, spoke out on behalf of Ukrainian human rights activists imprisoned in the Gulag, called for the legalization of the then banned and repressed Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and held hearings, several of them, on the Chernobyl disaster. With Ukraine's long-awaited independence when it came in 1991 and newfound freedoms also then became a reality, or we thought. But since 2010, with the election of Viktor Yanukovych, human rights, rule of law, and democracy have been on relentless attack, symbolized by the continued unjust imprisonment of former Prime Minister and opposition leader Yulia Tymoshenko, whose daughter, Yevgenia, testified at a Helsinki Commission hearing I held in May of 2012, and on whose behalf I and my colleagues introduced a resolution. It is the Ukrainian people's dissatisfaction with Yanukovych, his rollback of democracy, that drives the protest movement. The long-suffering Ukrainian people deserve a government that treats them with dignity and treats them with respect. I am confident they will prevail in their heroic struggle. I strongly support this resolution, and again thank my friend from New York for authoring it. Reserve the balance of our time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I request as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of HRS 447, a resolution I authored supporting the democratic and European aspirations of the people of Ukraine, and yield myself as much time as I may consume. I would first like to thank my original co-sponsors, Chairman Ed Royce, and Representatives William Keating, Ranking Member of the Europe Subcommittee, Marcy Kaptur, Sandy Levin, and Jim Gerlach of the Ukraine Caucus for their invaluable help in crafting this bipartisan resolution. I also thank my friend Mr. Smith of New Jersey for his remarks and agree with everything he said. The United States has been a staunch supporter of a democratic, prosperous, and sovereign Ukraine. And at this moment, we must stand with the people of Ukraine more than ever before. As the world has watched over the past several months, hundreds of thousands of ordinary Ukrainian citizens have turned out in Kiev and cities throughout the country to exercise their democratic rights and express their views. The initial impetus for the demonstration was the Ukrainian government's unexpected rejection of an offer from the European Union for closer political and economic ties. This rejection represented a reversal of government policy and, in the view of a great many Ukrainians, a lost opportunity for Ukraine to strengthen democratic institutions and values and increase economic opportunities. In addition, the demonstrators have turned out not only in support of closer relations with Europe, but also more fundamentally in support of democracy, good governance, human rights, and basic human dignity. The fact that they have done so in an overwhelmingly peaceful manner is very, very impressive. It is also inspiring, but sadly there have been exceptions to the peaceful nature of the protests. These include police violence on several occasions late last year, the disturbing pattern of beatings and abductions of journalists and civil society activists, and the most recent and tragic violence in January. Following this dramatic increase in tensions last month, the most recent developments in Ukraine give some cause for hope. I welcome the fact that meaningful talks appear to have begun between the government and opposition leaders. I would also like to applaud the admirable efforts of the Obama administration and our European partners to de-escalate tensions and support this dialogue. Nevertheless, the situation in Ukraine remains highly volatile, and it is imperative that we actively support a peaceful, negotiated end to this crisis. This resolution advances that goal by strongly condemning all acts of violence, irrespective of their perpetrators. Let me also take this opportunity to condemn all acts of extremism in Ukraine, all acts of hatred, and all acts of anti-Semitism. Moreover, the resolution calls on all individuals to behave responsibly. In particular, it calls on the Ukrainian authorities to respect and uphold the democratic rights of the citizens of Ukraine. It also states that those who authorize or engage in violence should be held personally accountable for their actions, including by targeted sanctions if appropriate. This is why I welcome the recent actions by the Department of State to revoke the visas of several individuals linked to the violence. The resolution further urges the Ukrainian government to bring to justice those responsible for violence against peaceful protesters, journalists and civic activists, and to take additional steps to de-escalate tensions. Finally, the resolution urges all parties to continue a substantive and sustained dialogue to peacefully resolve the crisis and address the legitimate desire of millions of Ukrainian citizens for a democratic European future looking west, not east. In sum, the passage of this resolution would send a strong message of support to the people of Ukraine. At this critical moment, they should know that the United States and the United States Congress stands with them as they seek to build a democratic, prosperous, and secure Ukraine, respecting human rights and dignity and anchored firmly in Europe. I urge my colleagues to support HRS 447, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Pennsylvania, the co-chair of the Ukrainian caucus, Jim Gerlach.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank the gentleman from New Jersey. Madam Speaker, I rise today because every now and then we are reminded that there are still people around the world fighting fiercely to secure the same individual liberties and foster the very same democratic traditions that Americans have been blessed with for nearly 238 years. During the past 3 months, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian citizens have taken to the streets of Kyiv and other cities in peaceful protest of a government that has ignored the will of the people and steered the country away from closer ties to democratic allies and supporters. The initial response from the Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was brutal. Government forces attacked protesters, resulting in at least 5 reported deaths. Furthermore, President Yanukovych enacted harsh new laws aimed at snuffing out dissent by making it a crime to peacefully protest against the government. Thanks to the vigilance of my colleagues in the Congressional Ukrainian Caucus and the leadership of Congressman Engel, Chairman Royce, and Subcommittee Ranking Member Keating, the actions of President Yanukovych have not gone unnoticed here in the United States Congress. Many of us have individually condemned the use of violence, repressive tactics against the protesters. Those of us in the Congressional Ukrainian Caucus have tried to convey those fighting for democracy in Ukraine that their efforts are not in vain, and that totalitarianism must not be allowed to rise again in any fashion. Today, all of us in the House have a chance to stand united with our friends in Ukraine who desire greater economic opportunity and individual liberty. And so I urge my colleagues to pass this resolution to let the world know the United States will not stand by and allow repression, violence, and political intimidation to prevail in Ukraine. Let's adopt this resolution for all those in Ukraine who wish for a government that is transparent, honors the fundamental human rights of its citizens, and respects the dignity of all Ukrainians, regardless of political affiliation. I thank the gentleman from California for introducing this resolution. I thank the gentleman from New Jersey for recognizing me, and I yield back, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Levin.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
To revise and extent. Thank you, Mr. Elliott, for yielding, and to Mr. Smith also, congratulations on your work. I rise today in strong support of House Resolution 447, supporting the democratic aspirations of the Ukrainian people and their right to choose their country's future and to choose its direction free from fear or intimidation, whether internal or external. For 3 months now, countless scores of Ukrainians across the country have braved not only the bitter cold, but also the constant threat of government-authorized violence to peacefully stand up for the universal principles of democracy and respect for human rights. With this resolution, we in the U.S. House stand with them now. A few weeks ago, I joined a large number of members of the Ukrainian American community that I proudly represent in the 9th Congressional District to express support for those demonstrating in the still colder winter in Ukraine. As a founding co-chair of the Congressional Ukrainian Caucus and original co-sponsor of this resolution, I believe it's important that the House pass this expression of support for the Ukrainian people. Those on Kiev's Maidan and throughout the country need to know that the world is watching, that the U.S. is watching, that we here are watching, and we support them. I say to them, we are and we do. With colleagues, I recently had the privilege of meeting with opposition members of the Ukrainian parliament. I was struck by what they indicated is their biggest fear and that of the demonstrators. There's the fear of riot police and government-backed thugs beating peaceful protesters, abhorrent behavior that has happened resulting in numerous deaths. There's the fear of being among the disappeared. According to reports, 20 opposition activists are still missing. What those brave democratic activists told us that they are most afraid of is being forgotten, of the international community turning its attention elsewhere, of our global commitment to human rights and the rule of law being mere words, idealism overtaken by other foreign policy priorities. The House today will take an important step to ensure that does not happen, that fear is not realized. Together with the Obama administration's continued forceful efforts and the earlier passage of a similar resolution in the Senate, we present a unified American front. We show the people of Ukraine that we will steadfastly support their democratic and European aspirations. We show Ukrainian President Yanukovych that America will not sit on the sidelines in the face of their government repression and gross human rights violation. And as the Obama administration has shown, America will not only condemn, we will take action. Like others, I welcome the State Department's revocation of visas held by Ukrainian government officials found to be responsible for violence against peaceful protesters. I encourage the administration to take additional action, including targeted financial sanctions should violence and human rights violations continue, which is what this resolution calls for. It is time for the government of Ukraine to immediately cease the use of violence, recognize the human rights of peaceful protesters and independent media, and participate in a true national dialogue with the opposition. I urge all of my colleagues to stand up with the courage, resilience, and indomitable spirit of the Ukrainian people and pass this resolution. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we can reserve the balance of our time.
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now yield 4 minutes to a very distinguished member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Cicilline.
I thank
the gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise in strong support of H.R. 447. As the tensions continue to rise in Ukraine about the future direction of this country, we understand that the people of Ukraine are hoping to secure basic democratic freedoms of association and speech for all citizens. I join my colleagues in stressing the importance of the adoption of democratic social norms in the Ukraine and in the region. Over the past several years, we've seen some impressive improvements in the area of human rights. However, the situation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals continues to cause serious concern. The rampant and unacceptable state-sponsored homophobia that we're witnessing in neighboring Russia is slowly invading Ukraine as well. Some individuals have sought to introduce legislation in the Ukrainian Rada similar to Russia's to ban so-called homosexual propaganda, which does nothing more than limit the fundamental freedoms of association, speech, and assembly for all Ukrainians, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. The citizens of Ukraine, including her LGBT citizens, deserve much, much better, and they should know we stand with them as they pursue a free, inclusive, and democratic society. I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey. Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Madam Speaker, how much time do I have?
You have 10.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I now yield 4 minutes to the gentlewoman from Ohio. She is co-chair of the Ukrainian Caucus, an original co-sponsor of this resolution, and she and I had the opportunity many years ago to travel together to Ukraine. Ms. Kaptur, 4 minutes.
The gentlelady from Ohio is recognized for 4 minutes.
I want to thank Ranking Member Eliot Engel of New York for his great leadership and Chairman Chris Smith of New Jersey for bringing this vitally important resolution up tonight, and I rise to express my support for House Resolution 447, supporting the courageous democratic aspirations of the people of Ukraine. I want to thank, on a bipartisan basis, Congressman Jim Gerlach of Pennsylvania for his co-chairmanship of our Ukrainian caucus, and we all stand in solidarity with the people of Ukraine. The people of Ukraine have the human right to choose their own future free of intimidation and fear. What courage it took for these interfaith religious leaders at Maidan to stand with their religious symbols, icons, and crosses, and other religious garb, along with their leaders, with their backs to the barricades, protecting the students as they faced the police. Over the past few months, the world has stood witness as Ukrainians have risen up, united in their desire for a more free, transparent, and democratic Ukraine. If one knows anything about the history of Ukraine, one knows what it took to do that in that place. The passage of House Resolution 447 here this evening means that our Congress stands in solidarity with those in Maidan and lends our support to the hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians peacefully demonstrating in the freezing, bitter, sub-zero temperatures for over 2 months for a more democratic and better future for all their people. If there is a God, and I believe there is, surely he or she will look down on this place and bless these people. The Ukrainian national anthem opens with the words, "Ukraine's glory has not yet died, nor her freedom. Upon us, fellow compatriots, fate shall smile once more." Indeed, fate shall smile once more upon Ukraine. Long live Ukraina. Long live her young people who hold in their hearts the democratic future of that nation. Mr. Speaker, I urge the passage of H.R. 447. I say to my colleagues here, this is a most important crossroads in history. Truly, this country can be the borderland nation that links West and East and South and North in that important part of the world. The world needs Ukraine. She is already the third largest grain exporter to the world's people. Her talent, her artistry, her vision has been quashed for so many, many, many decades and generations. Now is her moment, and we stand with her people, aspiring to that better day for all. I yield back my remaining time to the ranking member, and I thank again Chairman Smith for bringing up this really important resolution tonight. Thank you.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I just want to take 30 seconds to respond and thank the gentleman from Ohio for her very eloquent defense of the Ukrainian people and for again reminding Americans and the world the pivotal role that the patriarch and the highest, as well as people who are just among the faithful, are playing. The religious community is standing in solidarity with those who are aspiring for freedom and democracy and respect for human rights, and they have literally put themselves between the police and the barricades in a way that puts their very lives at risk, holding up crosses, holding up other, as the gentlelady said, icons of faith to say that we serve a God of peace and reconciliation. So I want to thank her for her eloquence.
Time has expired.
I ask for another 30 seconds or yield myself and yield to the gentlelady.
You know, looking back at the history of Ukraine in that region, the fact that you would have leaders of the Jewish faith, leaders of the Islam faith, leaders of Christian faith, be they Orthodox or Uniate or Roman Rite, all risking their substance. It is just incredible. This should be on the front page of every newspaper in the world, and world opinion should move progress forward and help those people who have stood in that bitter cold weather for over 2 months. Unless you've traveled to Ukraine and experienced those temperatures yourself,
time has expired.
You would not fully appreciate what they are enduring. I would yield my remaining time to the gentleman.
The gentleman is recognized.
I'm glad you brought up the interfaith aspect to this as well. I actually heard another hearing on anti-Semitism just several months ago, and the chief rabbi from Ukraine came and testified and gave very powerful testimony as to how the faith community is working side by side to mitigate and hopefully end the cruelty of anti-Semitism while simultaneously working with Christians and others on behalf of human rights. And again, this demonstration of the faith community should go noted by everybody in this chamber, and I hope for everyone in the world, and I thank my friend.
Time has expired. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, a very distinguished member of both the Budget and Ways and Means Committee and a member of the Ukrainian Caucus, Mr. Pascrell.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank the gentleman, and I thank both Mr. Elliott Engel and Mr. Chris Smith for leading us through what are important things for us to contemplate, because what's applicable to Ukraine is applicable to a lot of places in this world. So I'm a proud co-sponsor and a strong supporter of H.R. 447. It expresses our solidarity with the Ukrainian people and affirms their right to choose their own future. In this room, not that many years ago, we brought in the Prime Minister. Many of us had these flags, the colors of the Ukraine country. Mass protests have broken out in Ukraine following Yanukovych's decision in November to back away from negotiations for closer integration with Europe. So Russia has their fingers here. Their fingers in all of this. Beware. There was an agreement which had been supported by millions of Ukrainians in the Ukraine and around the world. We've known about the violence. We've known about the detainment because the folks just expressed their legitimate dissatisfaction with Yanukovych's government. However, the current crisis in Ukraine has deeper roots. Almost a decade ago, the Orange Revolution led to the annulment of a fraudulent election, which would have brought Viktor Yanukovych to power. In the wake of protests and civil disobedience on a massive scale, the Ukrainian people instead chose President Viktor Yushchenko and Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko. She's in jail. She's in jail right now as we speak, still. Now the democratic gains made as a result of that Orange Revolution are at risk. Viktor Yanukovych has gained the presidency, and former Prime Minister Tymoshenko, as I said, is still in jail. The use of force to suppress open expression by political opponents or popular protests can never be tolerated in a free and democratic society. And those within the Ukrainian government who authorize these brutal crackdowns should be held accountable for their egregious abuse of power. There has been a strong outpouring of support for the protesters from the large and active Ukrainian American community, many of whom live in my district, the 9th Congressional District of New Jersey. Ukrainian Americans deeply desire a solution to this crisis.
Time has expired.
One more minute.
Yield the gentleman an additional minute.
The gentleman's yielded an additional minute. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ukrainian Americans deeply desire a solution to the crisis which respects the fundamental rights of their sisters and brothers in Ukraine to free speech, free press, and peaceful assembly. It is my sincere hope that the United States can facilitate a peaceful resolution to the crisis in Ukraine, which respects the will of the Ukrainian people and brings justice to those who have been harmed through wrongful arrest and violence. As we saw in Syria, crackdowns on nonviolent protests can lead to an all-out civil war, and we still do not do what we should be doing with those refugees from Syria. That is a disgrace. We need to act now to help the people of Ukraine before the violence escalates further. I urge my colleagues to join this vital show of support for the American people to the people of Ukraine. And thank you. And I thank Mr. Engel and I thank Mr. Smith.
Time has expired.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized. Continues to reserve. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I have no further speakers. I just want to continue to urge my colleagues to support the resolution. As anyone can see, this is a very bipartisan resolution, very important, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman from
Madam
New
Speaker,
Jersey
we don't
is
have any
recognized.
further requests for time, but and again, I thank my good friend and colleague Elliot Engel for his sponsorship of this important resolution, and yield back the balance of our time.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 447 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, and the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on questions postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motions to suspend the rules on H.R. 2431 and House Res. 447, in each case by the yeas and the nays. And the question on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal, if ordered. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hall, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2431 as amended, on which the yeas and the nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 258, H.R. 2431, a bill to reauthorize the National Integrated Drought Information System.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The only votes of the day on two bills. This one on whether to reauthorize drought research at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It reauthorizes the program through fiscal 2018 and changes the mission of the program to require that the agency provide for more timely decision-making to reduce drought-related impacts and costs. The measure also requires the agency to provide early warning national and regional forecasts. Politico is reporting that House Republicans say the chamber will vote Wednesday on legislation to raise the debt limit and reverse recent changes to military retirement benefits. The announcement was made in a closed GOP meeting, according to several sources present. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew has said Congress should raise the debt limit by February 27th or risk defaulting on its debts. On that same issue, the Associated Press writes that a spokesman for House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said Democrats will continue to insist that any debt limit legislation omit add-ons, even bipartisan proposals like repealing military pension cuts. Another story, CQ Roll Call, writes that the Obama administration is again delaying parts of the new health care law requirements that employers provide health insurance for their workers. The change in the rules means that less than 2% of companies, those with more than 100 workers, will have to offer coverage for their workers next year. We covered a day-long forum at the Heritage Foundation today. One of the speakers was Republican Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. We'll watch what he said about the welfare system during this vote.
Here. I'm excited today to be introducing Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan, a lot of you all know. He's absolutely a great leader on almost every conservative issue that we work on, whether it be federal spending, tax reform, entitlements, pushing back against cronyism in Washington. Jim's on the front line of all of these different battles. He arrived on the scene in many ways when he chaired the Republican Study Committee. As he chaired the Republican Study Committee, his leadership there was extraordinary, and that committee really flourished under his leadership. It became clear under his chairmanship that this was a guy to keep an eye on. Since leaving the RSC chairmanship, Jim's not slowed down at all. He's become in many ways, I think, the voice of the conservative conscience in the House of Representatives. Now, on top of everything else that he's working on, He's taken on the very important work of transforming the welfare state, or we sometimes slang around here, we call it welfare reform 2.0. As you know, this has been a very important issue to the Heritage Foundation. It's been at the core of what we've been working on for decades. Heritage was instrumental in the 1994 success, and we are determined to keep those victories and to keep transforming the welfare state. So he's been working hand in glove with Robert Rector and Jen Marshall here at Heritage to translate those ideas for how to keep going into legislative form. So his bill has been dropped, I think, this week. It's ready to go. We're going to make a massive push after this for co-sponsors. We want the leadership team to bring this to the floor. This is a very important piece of legislation. So he's been working with our people here. He's also joined one of our panelists, Bob Woodson, who I'm excited for you all to be able to meet during the panel. And he's gone out in the field to see firsthand what the kind of challenges that we face are. As you know, this is going to be an important one for us. So I want us to be able to find a way to push this afterwards. We're excited to help Jim on this bill. We're excited to advance it. Please welcome Jim to the stage.
Thank you, Tim. Don't clap. You haven't heard me talk yet. That's thank you, Tim. Thanks to Heritage. Look, the greatest policy think tank in the whole darn world, and anytime you can team up with Heritage, they're doing, well said, they're doing all the work. I just happened to get the privilege of introducing the bill on the House side. Senator Lee is going to introduce it on the Senate side, but Heritage has done all the analysis, done the work, and we so appreciate their work, not only in this legislation, but of course on all kinds of conservative issues. These two people over here are going to join me in the panel are the specific ones. Bob Woodson's, we've been down in Richmond about a year and a half ago. A group of us went down and saw firsthand what people getting in the trenches and going out and helping people, not just talking policy, not just sitting and saying big things and nice things, but going out and ministering, and I choose that word specifically, ministering to people and helping them improve their lives. And Jennifer Marshall, of course, has been tremendous. She organized the whole trip and has, done so much research in this area. Let me say it this way. If you're going to stop poverty, it seems to me in the broad sense, and I'm going to talk real brief and we'll get to the panelists because they're the experts. If you're going to cure poverty, if you're going to prevent most of poverty, three things you need: work, strong families, and free markets. I mean, it's really that simple. A work ethic and focus on work, a focus on marriage and family, and a focus on free markets. And let's be honest, this administration is not doing very good in any of those three areas. And that's why we need to change, and that's why we need to highlight this. And that's really what our bill is all about. And I want to just spend my few minutes here talking mostly about the first thing, and that's work. We crossed the line last week. You all probably saw the CBO report. We now have one of the two major parties in this country embracing this concept that less work and more help from government is now part of the Democrat platform. And I would argue we crossed that line last week. Did you hear the comments that Keith Ellison made? And I like Keith. He's a nice guy. Did you hear his comments yesterday on the Sunday shows? You heard what Nancy Pelosi said about job lock. You heard what Harry Reid said about job lock. I mean, it's sad to see one of the two major parties now, what I would argue, step over the line and embrace this idea that somehow it's good when people work less. We come from an entirely different focus, and this bill that we have is an entirely opposite direction. We think work's a good thing. And I would just ask you all to do one. Let's just do a kind of a short exercise. Think about the first job you had, the very first job you had. Maybe it was a paper route. Maybe it was babysitting the neighbor's kids. Maybe it was working at a McDonald's or a Burger King or some other fast food restaurant. Maybe it was a waiter or waitress. For me, it was baling hay. I grew up out in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. It was baling hay and mowing lawns. First real business we had was mowing lawns. And I was thinking about this as I was over the weekend. The lessons I learned. My brother and I had a little lawn mowing business. And you think about the things you learned from that first business, how to manage money and manage resources. We had a kind of interesting operation. My dad was old school, and he said, all right, I'll provide the truck, the beater of a truck. I'll build the trailer, give you the two mowers. We had two riding lawn mowers. We had one push mower. We had a weed eater and our tools and our gas cans and that kind of thing. He said, I'll provide those. You guys got to pay for the gas. You guys are going to have to, you hang out with your buddies, you have a date on the weekend, that'll come out of the money you earned from your first job. I mean, you learned You learn to sort of manage the resource. And he was old school too. If you were screwing around and you broke something on the mower, you had to pay for that. If it was a normal wear and tear, he would cover that. You learned about work and the satisfaction you get from doing a job well. You get done, you see the nice lawn you mowed. You understand that you met the customer's need. I mean, you learned those basic values. And when we don't let people experience that, or we have policies that discourage that and disincentivize that, we're robbing them of the opportunity to learn those skills, those lessons, those principles, those values that we all got from that very first job. And we took those skills and lessons and principles on to some other better employment. I'm not, obviously not still mowing lawn, although I like to mow my own, and I do. But that's what we're missing, this focus on work. I mean, I was thinking the skills you learn, I mean, you learn to deal with people. We had these, it was funny, whenever someone would call our house, they'd find out that we were in the mowing business. I still remember this, too, with my dad. Someone would call, and we'd see him answer the phone. Yeah, the boys, yeah, they'll be, and we knew someone was asking for us to mow their lawn as well, and we figured we had about 20 at the time, and we didn't need any more. So we'd be in the background like, no, we don't want any more. And my dad never turned one down. When anyone called, we always took that additional lawn. But you learn to deal with people. We had, I still remember the Steinberger ladies, two older ladies who were never married, lived together, two sisters, and they had kind of a big lawn. Well, we quickly learned. A lot of times you pull into someone's house, you just grab the mowers and get to work because you had to get to the next one. But with that house, we always went and took a few minutes before we started to talk to them. Because we knew if we talked to them a little bit and visit with them a little bit, they were more likely to bake the chocolate chip cookies and have them waiting for us. And they did that so many times. You just learn those skills that are important in the business I'm in now, right? Still, we had to keep track, and you had to write down when so many people wanted it mowed on Thursday and Friday before the weekend. Just different things you had to do. But I guess my point is this: we're robbing people of the opportunity to get those same skills. And we have a bill that focuses on that focuses on how important work is. That central element. Our bill is real simple. Real simple. It says, let's do two things. Let's figure out what we're spending all the money on right now. Let's do an aggregate of all the 77 different means-tested social welfare programs your federal tax dollars are used to fund the various social welfare spending we do. Let's aggregate that. Let's figure that out. And let's require states, let's incentivize states to have work programs that actually make a difference in people's lives and teach them those lessons that we all learned, whether it was mowing lawns, flipping burgers, running a paper route, babysitting the kid's neck, whatever it happened to be. Let's teach them those basic skills so that you can move on to some better employment and something better in life. I think if you had a chance, and if you see this story in here, I got it, Wall Street Journal over the weekend. I thought it was interesting. Economist Casey Mulligan, did you guys see this story? Talking about this issue. He's the guy behind. We actually just sort of I guess in many ways luck or the skill of our staff at the Oversight Committee. We had Professor Mulligan speak at a subcommittee hearing about a year ago on the unemployment concerns and started talking about these issues. And of course CBO understood this guy had it right. And it was largely his analysis that was put into their analysis and this whole disincentive that now exists under Obamacare, and I would argue in the broader policies from this administration. But I think it's worth reading that if you get a chance. President Johnson, I'll finish here and we'll get to our panel. President Johnson said this: he wants to strike at the causes of poverty, not just the consequences. And that's what our bill wants to do as well. You want to get at what causes poverty? It's disincentivizing work. You want to get at what causes poverty? It's not focusing on marriage and family. And you want to get at what causes poverty? It's not adhering to free markets. And so when we focus on those things, good things can happen and we can move in the right direction. Last thing I'll say is, I used to say this to all the student athletes we got a chance to, some of you know my background before I got crazy and got in this business of politics and public life. I was assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State University. And I used to tell our student athletes all the time, hard work doesn't guarantee success, but it sure improves your chances. You want to achieve things in life that have meaning and significance, hard work's the best ticket. And when we have a culture and when we have government policies that go in the opposite direction, that's a mistake. and that's something we should all look to correct. And when you focus on that work component, that work ethic, you build the quality that I think is the most important character quality necessary for anyone to achieve anything of meaning, anything of significance, and that's self-discipline. It's so important. So I think I've shared this story with Tim before, but it stuck with me. At our high school wrestling coach at our high school, and wrestling is big at our school. My brother's the coach at our high school. We've won the state championship in our state the last 14 years in a row. It's a big deal. But the coach who got it all started at our school was Coach McCon, was our coach back in the day. The wrestling room is named after Coach McCon. He's passed on. He got cancer a few years ago and passed away. Had an amazing memorial service for this guy because he had a huge impact on students and student athletes in our school. And he would talk about discipline every day. At our school, he was the toughest teacher in our school. He taught chemistry and physics. I mean, I still remember. Jordan, this is chemistry class. It's not just any old class. You want to do well in my class? You better read the material the night before. You better come to class prepared. You better answer questions and participate in class. It's going to take discipline to do well in this class. This is chemistry. And then the wrestling room, oh my goodness, he would drive me nuts. He's like, self-discipline is the most important character quality necessary to accomplish anything meaning, significance, the most important self. And I was like, would that guy shut up? He's driving me crazy. He sounds just like my dad. I get it enough from my dad at home, now I got to get it from coach in class and in the wrestling room. But he had a great definition, and it hangs in our wrestling room today. Discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. And that meant doing things, I mean, you think about it, it meant doing things coach's way and you'd rather do them your own way. It meant doing things the right way when you'd rather do them the easy and convenient way. And the biggest problem in this town is we always do things the convenient way instead of the right way. This bill is about teaching people those qualities to help them do things the right way so they can experience the American dream, so they can better their lives and their families' lives. And it's all about focusing on these concepts of hard work and self-discipline. And that's why I'm so excited about it. We'll get there. It won't be easy, but, you know, you guys know this. Tell me anything in life that's worth doing that's ever easy. It's going to take work and effort, but when you're working with the Heritage Foundation, I'll bet on that team every time. Thank you all very much, and time for questions. Oh, we got to do panel. We're doing the panel, that's right.
Thank you, Jim. If I could invite our panel up now, and I'll introduce them as they come up. If you haven't had a chance to hear from Bob Woodson before, you're in for a treat today. Bob Woodson's founder and president of the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise. He's been working with a lot of folks in Congress, like Jim said, getting them on the ground, getting them to talk with people, really to understand, to rub shoulders with folks and see what the challenges are that we face. And Bob's work has been really important to this effort. Jen Marshall here at the Heritage Foundation has been working a lot with Bob and with Robert Rector on this. And Jen's the director of our domestic policy studies here at Heritage, and we are really privileged to have her too. I'll open it up with a couple questions here, and then we can go to the audience. I think I'd like to start with Bob. Bob, your testimony at the Senate Budget Committee last year about Hurt with the Helping Hand, we saw that, very powerful. You shared a story about your niece in that testimony, and I think that's what we're really connected with a lot of people. Would you mind just sharing that with the group here today and talk about the implications of it?
Yes, when the chairman, first of all, started off by talking about when her father died, left behind 6 children, impoverished rural community, and welfare was important for the family to become restored, and they all went to college on government scholarships, and therefore that was her defense. And my response was that we generalize about poor people. We should disaggregate them. You have people who use welfare whose character's intact, like she did. And it was used as an ambulance service, not a whole transportation system. And then you got category 2, like the woman a mom in Wisconsin who saved $5,000 of her welfare check so she could send her daughter to college, and she was charged with a felony. And she reasoned, well, I made a decision, and therefore I'll stay dependent, not because she had bad character, it was just she made a conscious decision. So that's the second category. The third category, though, are those who are poor because of the chances that they take and the choices that they make. There are character deficits there, and who are alcoholics, who have babies out of wedlock and whatnot, to that last category, giving money to them only injures them with the helping hand. And I said that my own niece, back in the 90s, was an alcoholic, living in public housing. She had a small child. I spent a year and thousands of dollars trying to wean her off of that, found her an apartment in Arlington, Virginia, away from Philadelphia, found her a job, and I went to pick her up at 2 o'clock in the morning at one of the most dangerous public housing projects in Philadelphia. When I went up at 2 in the afternoon, she was drunk, and I couldn't compete against public housing. I couldn't compete against food stamps. I couldn't compete. It was only after welfare reform 2 years afterwards was she compelled, therefore, to go out and work, and now she is on her feet. I say that to say that it's important for us to disaggregate that and recognize that help to that third category. People on the left tend to look at all welfare recipients as if they're Category 1, and people on the right tend to look at all welfare recipients as if they're Category 3. So we must adjust our interventions to meet the category of people we're trying to meet. So we must frame it properly.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And just one other question. I know this will probably come up. Talk about the importance of bringing folks like Jim and Paul Ryan and some of the other folks you've had. Talk about why you think it's so important that we as conservatives get out there and do this.
I think as conservatives, we talk a lot about, I think people on the left, as Bill Bennett said, when they look at poor people, they see a sea of victims, and people on the right see a sea of aliens. Mm-hmm. And I think when we talk about poor people, we spend too much time talking about their deficits and their shortcomings and giving statistics about the 70% who are born out of wedlock. People are not motivated to change and improve by warning them about injuries to be avoided. We as conservatives must inspire people to talk about victories that are possible. The grassroots, instead of always focusing on the 70% of the families that are raising children in deficit communities, we should look at the 30% living in those communities that are raising children that are not dropping out of school or on jail and drugs. And we should go in, scholars, and ask this 30%, what is it that they are doing that's different than their neighbors, and how can we then insinuate support and resources into them so that the 30% can begin to affect the 70%. So we should be the champions of the 30% as much as we are opponents of the 70%. And therefore, and Jim has seen firsthand what happens when you go in to communities that are suffering the problem that are character challenges. It requires an intervention by those who are living in the same cultural zip code and the same geographic zip code. Nothing is more powerful to a person trying to find new direction than exposure to a witness that transformation is possible. And a witness is more powerful than an advocate. And so what we do at the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, and Jim was a party to this, is go into those neighborhoods and identify people that are healing agents. We know that the human body is oriented towards health, so that the moment there's injury, healing begins. And so what we must do as conservatives is go in and identify those community antibodies and find creative ways that we can insinuate resources, information, and money so that these individual antibodies collectively become a whole immune system, so that therefore the body of the neighborhood is healed from the inside out and the bottom up. So we should be, because many of those healing agents, these grassroots people, embody conservative principles. They believe in sacrifice, they believe in struggle. They believe that the victimizer might have knocked you down, but the victim has to get up. They believe in all the things that but they're unarticulated conservative principles. And so when Jim had seen, and Paul Ryan has, when you go in there, the qualities that make them effective also renders them invisible. They're not whining or complaining or petitioning government. They're just busy doing your work. You've got to act like a Geiger counter and find them. They're not looking for you. And once you do, you must recognize the strengths that they have and try to build on their strengths and enable them rather than going in and imposing policies on them. There were many barriers that we found, for instance, in drug and alcohol. As Pastor Freddie Garcia said, if our problems in America with alcoholism and drug addiction were economic, God would have sent an economist. If our problems were education, He would have sent an educator. But because our problems were sin, He sent a Savior. But that's something else.
Thank you, Bob. I'll ask one more question, and then we'll open it up for Jen. We just recently had a lot of commentary about 50 years since the War on Poverty was launched, and it's been an opportunity, I think, to talk about what our solutions are as conservatives. But maybe you could briefly give an assessment of the 50-year War on Poverty, and then talk about what it's going to take for us to break through with our ideas.
Yeah, the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty was January 8th, and as Congressman Jordan has already said, President Lyndon Johnson very rightly said he wanted to attack the causes of poverty, not the symptoms. That's a very noble intention. But how is it borne out? Well, today that War on Poverty comprises 80 different programs that provide cash, food, housing, medical assistance, and targeted social assistance to poor and low-income Americans. And we're spending at all levels of government nearly $1 trillion per year, a total price tag over the years of $20 trillion. Now, I bring that up only to say that if we were going to win this war on poverty by spending, we would have done it a long time ago. So we've got to look more deeply at the things that Bob's calling us to look at, the incentives, the incentive structure within these welfare programs. And this is just as true for any private enterprise that's trying to tackle poverty. Incentives matter. And so in the same time period, the unwed childbearing rate has gone from single digit to 40% overall. We have some markers that we need to be aware of, but then get very focused on the incentives that are going to bring out the success stories that Bob is talking about. And that's what Congressman Jordan's legislation will do. It brings a food stamp work requirement into the puzzle, and that's just emblematic of one program. By the way, in 1996 with the TANF reform, the welfare reform that was so widely hailed, left and right, as a great success because it transformed the old aid to families with dependent children into a path towards self-sufficiency. It required work and made sure that people were engaged in work activities over time. And that led to dramatic effects. The welfare rolls fell in half, child poverty reached a historic low, and that unfortunately was not a lesson to say let's repeat that success in others of these 80 programs, but too many people walked away and said the job's done. Well, the job is not done. We have not done justice to the poor in the United States, and we need to keep working. We need to build on that success. The next step is Congressman Jordan's legislation, and we look forward to engaging in this new conversation about how we make the path towards self-sufficiency more clear and the incentives in federal law match that.
Great. I'd like to just add a footnote to that. The black community is often a moral barometer of the health of the nation. And prior to the 1960s, 85% of all black families had a man and a woman raising children. 85%. But since the 60s and intervention, that has now gone down to 30%. And if race and poverty spending were the cure, then Detroit should be a social reform mecca. But it isn't, because the problem is structurally 70% of every dollar spent on poor people does not go to poor people. It goes to those that serve poor people. They ask not which problems are solvable, but which ones are fundable this year. So you have perverse incentives for professional service providers to serve the poor, no matter how compassionate they may be. If their income and their careers are dependent upon having people to serve, no matter how compassionate, you're asking them to sacrifice their own personal careers and their income in order to empower poor people. Conservatives, by contrast, have no proprietary or strategic interest in the existence of poverty, and therefore they've got more of an incentives to partner with the people suffering the problem. But we've got to make that kind of leap and demonstrate to people that we're willing to. And the final point is we must come up with non-governmental interventions. For instance, in Indianapolis, Indiana, you have a program there where a church that I took Congressman Ryan. For example, you have Kurt Moore. Kurt spent 13 years in federal prison and he came out, found Christ, and didn't leave him in prison but brought him with him. But Kurt needed a job. So he was given a job in this ministry that worked with him, washing cars for another member of the church for 4 months. He said, why don't you go in business for yourself? So Kurt was given a beat-up van and some equipment, and Kurt started washing cars in people's driveways. 2 years after that, he now employs 15 people. He has contracts with 23 car dealerships to wash trucks. But Kurt, and so we need to come in. John Williams is a local business guy, and so now they are in partnership to talk about giving him access to capital because he has to buy new equipment, but he doesn't have any credit because he was in prison. But when we can come in and partner with people like that, provide access to capital, coaching, and so that we can begin to establish these kind of relationships all over the country, and the church has 15 other entrepreneurs, rather than vilifying the rich, let's provide the means for wealthy people to share their strategies for creating wealth and also their business acumen, so that we can grow and generate jobs by building on the strengths of people in those communities. So we really need to always talk in terms of what is working in those communities, how can we build on those strengths, and you will find that when Kurt has when asked about minimum wage, he'll have a different response than some advocate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Great. Well, let's open it up for questions. Right here. Yes, sir.
Question for Chairman. Could you pass a law could you pass a law to waive minimum wage for, let's say, kids under 20?
Yeah, it might not get signed by the president, but we could work on. I think Bob's comments were right on target. Let's do what works, not what people here in Washington, think may work or is proven it doesn't work. So yeah, we could focus on that kind of thing, but getting it across.
Being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, to suspend the rules and agree to House Resolution 447 as amended, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 447, resolution supporting the democratic and European aspirations of the people of Ukraine and their right to choose their own future, free of intimidation and fear.